Yeah, I'll react to that, sure.
This
Okay, Geohistory, great channel. Hey guys, hope you're doing well. Original link to the video, top of the description. 7 Years War, summary on a map, preemptive like, let's go. I was about to get into, well, I've been watching some Napoleonic stuff. I was about to get into some American Revolution stuff. And I kind of have this idea, or have been having this idea in my head, that the 1700s just aren't that interesting compared to the 18 and 1900s. I think I could be wrong. I mean, in the very early part of the century, you had Great Northern War, you had War of Spanish Succession, then you had the only other conflicts I know about at all are the 7 Years War, and then, you know, like the American Revolution, the French Revolution, and then the very beginning of the Napoleonic Wars. But really, I think of the Napoleonic Wars more of an early 19th century thing than a late 18th century. But what happened between, you know, those very early wars of the Great Northern War, War of Spanish Succession, and the 7 Years War? I think I'm going to try and learn about that after this. So let's get started. 7 Years War, summary on a map.
little-known war took place in the mid-18th century, mainly in Europe, but also for the first time in European colonies around the world. This is why it is sometimes considered as a First World War. Let's retrace on a map a summary of the events and consequences of the 7 Years' War.
When did this happen?
We begin in 1740, when the Holy Roman Empire
Perfect.
is divided into a multitude of territories ruled by prince-electors. At the very top of the hierarchy is the title of Emperor, which has been shared for almost 300 years by the powerful Habsburg house. But this year, Emperor Charles VI, who is also Archduke of Austria, King of Bohemia, and the King of Hungary, dies without a male successor. His eldest daughter, Marie-Thérèse, cannot be emperor, but nevertheless inherits the territories of her father. For some competitors, this is a golden opportunity to challenge the Austrian domination. Thus, the young king of Prussia, Frederick II, without a declaration of war, invades the rich region of Silesia. France, Austria's traditional enemy, takes advantage of the situation to join forces with Prussia. Britain, meanwhile, backs Austria, fearing an imbalance of power in favor of the French Empire. After 5 years of war, Prussia abandons its French ally by signing a peace treaty with Austria. Prussia holds on to the territory of Silesia, but recognizes Marie-Thérèse as the Archduchess of Austria. Her husband,
So calling the French and Prussians even allies at all at any point is sort of a stretch, right? It just seems like France is just taking advantage of what's going on between Prussia and Austria. So, okay. And then England, as always, the UK is always looking from over the English Channel, so overpowered. And, you know, just supporting as it sees fit. Okay.
France recognizes Marie-Thérèse as the Archduchess, holds on to the territory of Silesia, but recognizes Marie-Thérèse as the Archduchess of Austria. Her husband, Francis of Lorraine, obtains the title of Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. France finds itself alone against the coalition and still manages to seize the Austrian Netherlands. A peace treaty was signed in 1748, and against all odds, the King of France, Louis XV, returns the territories to Austria. After the war, a strong rivalry develops between Prussia and Austria, which hopes to one day recover Silesia. Moreover, the French and British empires increasingly compete for their colonies in the world, primarily in North America, where New France surrounds British colonies. With boundaries not clearly defined, the two powers compete for the Ohio Valley. The first clashes taking place there are mostly dominated by the French side. From a military point of view, Britain dominates the seas and oceans with its powerful Royal Navy, while the French army is deemed stronger. George II, King of Great Britain and Prince-Elector of Hanover, fears losing the German state in case of war. He approaches Prussia for protection and signs an alliance, upsetting the while the French army is deemed stronger. George II, King of Great Britain and Prince Elector of Hanover, fears losing the German state in case of war. He approaches Prussia for protection and signs an alliance, upsetting the traditional balance of power in the region. After centuries of competition, France and Austria join forces and are joined most notably by Russia. European powers meanwhile prepare for war.
I love this style of learning, and I need to always go to this stuff because I am not a great learner. I never have been, okay? And it's when you go like so let's say you want to learn about the 7 Years' War, okay? And I'm trying to learn it. And I understand this is kind of for me, it might be for others, and I understand a lot of people do learn more from a more magnified view. It's like when I'm learning about the 7 Years' War as a subject, and in like a classroom where you'd probably go like, all right, we're learning about the 7 Years' War, and you start with the very beginning, and without doing an overview of the whole conflict, you just kind of start, okay, it starts here, this happened, here's this battle and this battle. I learn horribly with that. I like going, like, give me a rough overview, simplified version of a conflict that I can then, after understanding the bigger picture, start to go into the more detailed stuff in perhaps a chronological way. But I don't think that history has to be learned chronologically. I don't think it does. If you're good at learning it that way, then great. But I like sort of, like, there's nothing I'm waiting for spoilers or anything like that. I just want to understand the conflict or the period I'm trying to understand. And getting a video or something like this really helps me out. Anyways, I hope I said that correctly, but...
From the traditional balance of power in the region. After centuries of competition, France and Austria join forces and are joined most notably by Russia. European powers meanwhile prepare for war. France attacks first and sends its army to the British island of Minorca. In India, Britain prepares for war by fortifying Calcutta without the agreement of the Prince of Bengal. The latter responds by driving them out of the city. Britain counterattacks, recovers Calcutta, dethrones the prince, and moves to attack French colonies.
That backfired on the... so the prince... So they were... Oh my... Wow. It's like, oh, we have to fight the British right now. We don't have time. I just got to do this. Well, nope, we're kicking you out. And then the British show up and you're just more vulnerable than ever. Wow. Okay.
The latter responds by driving them out of the city. Britain
See, now I would like to learn more in depth of what happened here. That's kind of what I mean. Sorry.
The latter responds by driving them out of the city. Britain counterattacks, recovers Calcutta, dethrones the prince, and moves to attack French colonies. In North America, the British Empire prepares to send large military reinforcements. In the European theatre, France prepares a ground offensive in Hanover. Prussia, which finds itself surrounded, launches the first strike on Saxony, a rich, poorly protected region. The offensive is a success, despite an Austrian counterattack. Prussia continues its offensive by attacking Bohemia. But this time, the intervention of the Austrian army prevents the capture of Prague and pushes the Prussians back to Silesia. In the west, the French offensive in Hanover is a success. The French army now advances to Prussia, which finds itself besieged. To the east, the Russian army captures its first territories, and in the south, the Austrian army advances towards Silesia. Britain attempts to distract France from Hanover by initiating military raids on its Atlantic ports. A first military expedition is sent to Rochefort, but is countered by the French army. Frederick II of Prussia sets out with his army to face the French. A fine strategist, he wins despite having a much smaller army. He then moves to face off against the Austrian army and once again wins due to his strategy despite having fewer soldiers.
A lot fewer. Wow.
In North America, Britain stations ships at the mouth of the St. Lawrence River to blockade and isolate the French colony. On the European side,
Okay, I feel like this is like things are not looking good for the British or the Prussians, more importantly the Prussians, because they're actually facing invasion, unlike the British. And the French taking Hanover, and then Britain trying to like distract them, and that failing by attacking the Bay of Biscay coast, right? Atlantic, France's western coast on the Atlantic. And then Prussia isn't fully able to go into Prague, and then Austria pushes them back, and now you're facing Austria. First France, after they've been just winning, and then Austria, and you defeat them both despite incredible numbers disadvantages and from planning. And so this right here, I mean, if you lose, and you have the Russians, who are sided with the French and Austrians, man. So this is Frederick the Great, right? I mean, talk about a history-altering moment at this time. And one man, or I'm sure a lot of very capable strategical leaders doing the insane. See, now I want to go into more depth here. This is how I personally learn so much better. It's just give me the whole overview, and then I'll look at everything and then want to dive into each thing, and I'll fill in the gaps.
And strategist, he wins despite having a much smaller army. He then moves to face off against the Austrian army and once again wins due to his strategy despite having fewer soldiers. In North America, Britain stations ships at the mouth of the St. Lawrence River to blockade and isolate the French colony. On the European side, King George II refuses to recognize the surrender of his son in Hanover. He raises a new army that repels the French. In parallel, new raids are organized. After another failure on St. Malo, an offensive on the city, King George II refuses to recognize the surrender of his son in Hanover. He raises a new army that repels the French. In parallel, new raids are organized. After another failure on St. Malo, an offensive on the city of Cherbourg is a success, and the city is looted. This time, Britain mounts a bigger offensive by sending 42,000 men to St. Malo. But they suffer a serious setback faced against 7,000 French soldiers. This failure marks the end of the raids on France. Britain now concentrates on Hanover and the colonies. In Africa, after the capture of St. Louis, Britain marks the end of the raids on France. Britain now concentrates on Hanover and the colonies. In Africa, after the capture of St. Louis, Britain seizes the island of Gorée. In the east, while Prussia repulses the Russian army, this time it suffers a heavy defeat against Austria, which forces it to retreat for the winter. France plans to invade Great Britain. To do this, an army of 100,000 men would be escorted by the military fleets of Toulon and Brest. In parallel, a new army is sent to Hanover, but the latter fails to take hold. Meanwhile, Britain intensifies attacks against French colonies. It captures Caribbean islands and lays siege to Quebec City.
I feel like that's probably a good call by France. Again, the little I know and how, but I mean, you're shown to be pretty impervious in your homeland in France. You defeated British attacks, and now that seems like a good thing that you could do. And even if you fail, wouldn't necessarily be subject to a certain invasion of the British on them. Am I just wrong?
Meanwhile, Britain intensifies attacks against French colonies. It captures Caribbean islands and lays siege to Quebec City. In the east, Russia manages to join the Austrian army. Together, they overcome the army of Frederick II, which opens the way to Berlin, which is not protected. But following disagreements, both armies stop there. For France, the situation is complicated. With their military fleets of Toulon and Brest defeated by the Royal
Wait, what?
East, Russia manages to join the Austrian army. Together, they overcome the army of Frederick II, join the Austrian army. Together, they overcome the army of Frederick II, which opens the way to Berlin, which is not protected. But following disagreements, both armies...
Oh, I thought it said following this agreement. And so I'm talking about like what agreement? But it said following disagreements. Okay.
The way to Berlin, which is not protected. But following disagreements, both armies stopped there. For France, the situation is complicated. With their military fleets of Toulon and Brest defeated by the Royal Navy, the invasion of Great Britain is abandoned. Without military fleets, France can no longer support its colonies. In North America, New France is in disarray.
True.
After the
okay,
capture
I'm completely wrong about being a good idea then. Yeah, my bad.
In North America, New France is in disarray. After the capture of Quebec, Britain seizes Montreal. The island of Dominica in the Caribbean and Pondicherry in India fall in quick succession. In Europe, despite several attempts, France can no longer impose itself on Hanover. On the other hand, severely weakened and facing defeat, the King of Prussia regroups his last remaining forces into a single army. In January 1762, the war takes a new turn with the death of Elizabeth, the Tsarina of Russia. Her successor, Peter III of Russia, is an admirer of Prussia and does not want to engage in war. He quickly signs a peace treaty. In the West, the Spanish Empire takes a negative view of British domination. Spain then goes to war with France. An army is...
And then this also shows how France and Spain were looking to sort of help the American, I guess you can call them traitors at the time, but the colonists trying to, revolt against the British. And just, it shows you a backdrop of the tension a decade and a half prior.
Sent to Portugal, the Iberian ally of Great Britain, forcing the latter to send reinforcements. But in parallel, in the West, the Spanish Empire takes a negative view of British domination. Spain then goes to war with France. An army is sent to Portugal, the Iberian ally of Great Britain, forcing the latter to send reinforcements. But in parallel, Britain takes advantage of an opportunity to seize Cuba.
Goes to war alongside France.
And Manila. In parallel, Britain takes advantage of an opportunity to seize Cuba and Manila in the Philippines. In Prussia, the king's army succeeds in defeating the Austrian army. Exhausted by years of war, European powers begin peace negotiations. Two peace treaties are signed separately. A first in Paris between France, Great Britain and Spain. France loses almost all its colonies. The country retains some territories in America, the island of Gorée in Africa, and 5 posts in India, provided they do not fortify or send armies there. Spain recovers Cuba, Manila, and gets Louisiana in exchange for Florida and peace with Portugal. On the other hand, the Treaty of is there. Spain recovers Cuba, Manila, and gets Louisiana in exchange for Florida and peace with Portugal.
So when does France get Louisiana from the Spanish?
On the other hand, the Treaty of Hubertusburg is signed between Prussia and Austria. Prussia liberates Saxony, in exchange for which it retains Silesia. The human toll of war is heavy, with 1.3 million people dead. More than half of them are civilians. European powers are weakened by war and forced to increase taxes to repay their debts. The first colonial empire...
Okay, so the vast majority of the deaths, I'm assuming, in this area, right? In the, Silesia, Prussia, and Hanover. And what was this again? The name?
Empire of France is dismantled. The country invests powers are weakened by war and forced to increase taxes to repay their debts. The first colonial empire of France is dismantled. The country invests in its military industry, mainly its naval fleet, to catch up with Britain. Austria is forced to abandon Silesia, but saves face by liberating Saxony. Prussia, although greatly weakened, is now respected and even feared. Finally, Britain becomes the major world power, but its empire is also indebted by war. It intends to take advantage of its colonies to repay debt through new taxes.
Here we come. There I am, guys, Rhode Island.
Causes great discontent. On the other hand, Native American tribes unite to demand the departure of the British from the former French colony
And weren't the, like, I mean, it was sort of to protect you.
demand the departure of the British from the former French colony and demand an independent state. The government tries to calm the situation by creating in a rush an Indian reservation. But this again prevents British colonists from expanding their territories in the West, increasing frustrations. This sows the seeds of separation between the British government and its colonists, which intends to take advantage of its colonies to repay debt through new taxes, which causes great discontent. On the other hand, Native American tribes unite to demand the departure of the British from the former French colony and demand an independent state. The government tries to calm the situation by creating in a rush an Indian reservation. But this again prevents British colonists from expanding their territories in the West, increasing frustrations. This sows the seeds of separation between the British government and its colonists.
I don't see that, nearly as, I don't learn about that nearly as much as the taxes part, but I mean, that's, wow. Amazing channel. Again, the original link, top of the description, guys, Geohistory. That was really cool. Yeah, and I think I kind of explained what I meant about, like, I do better learning about a greater, and even, like, if I don't go back, and it's like, oh, well, you never went back to that. If I just tried to learn the chronological way and, start in the beginning and historical figure by historical figure and battle by battle and everything, I can't learn anything. So I love learning this way first and then kind of getting into more detail. Love you guys. Hope you're all doing well. Would appreciate any comments down below. And hopefully I'll see you guys next video. Like and subscribe. Bye, guys.